Okay, Carl, good to have you back on our show. We've been investigating into matters, and it turns out that Iran is not the only country that Israel tried to put out its nuclear facilities. There are other countries. So let's talk through one by one what happened in these cases.
Yeah, so Israel apparently made its goal to prevent any Muslim majority country from acquiring nuclear weapons. This led their bombing of Iraq, bombing of Syria, um, and it actually had a plan to stop Pakistan from acquiring nuclear weapons. Because for Israel, it's not acceptable for any Muslim majority nation to acquire a bomb. Um, and the Pakistan bomb was actually originally designed to match the India's nuclear program, especially after 1970s. In 1974, India performed a nuclear weapon testing in 1974, and after that, Pakistan accelerated its own nuclear program. This brought a lot of concerns on the side of Israel. So by 1980, they got wind that the Pakistan was really close to develop a bomb. So they apparently formed a plan with India to bomb Pakistan's nuclear site, because for Israel, Israel have the capability to bomb Syria, Iraq, because they're close. They're close enough. But beyond that, Israel have run into the problem of distance. I mean, even most recently, when Israel conducted the bombing of Iran, there's wide suspicion that Israel actually received help from the United States, because Israel F-35s cannot go to Iran without refueling, and Israel's in-flight refueling capability is just not there. They had to rely on U.S. fuel tankers to fuel them. So what they claim to have done, Israel claimed to have done, is their F-35 claim they carry extra tankers, extra drop tanks, the on the outside of the F-35 to carry extra fuel. But anyway, Pakistan is a little bit too far. It's one land too far for Israel Air Force to reach, and particularly back in 1980. So Israel worked out a deal with India, because India also have an interest to stop Pakistan's nuclear program. That Israeli Air Force flew in their F-16s into India. They're based in Gujarat, and they plan to uh, fly through the Himalayan foothills, fly low to avoid radar detection from Pakistan, and then bomb the Pakistan nuclear site. Now, this is a very serious thing, and but Pakistan side apparently got wind of this. They through their there's through their intelligent operations, they find out about the Israeli plan. So now at this time, 1980 is a very interesting time, because this is right after 1979, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. So Pakistan was actually the linchpin for U.S. strategy to contain the Soviet Union, and particularly to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. This is how CIA at the time had one of the largest program called Operation Cyclone, which is to funnel arms into Afghan mujahideens to fight the Soviet, and they had to do it through Pakistan. Pakistan was a basic supply base, so United States had to rely on Pakistan for its proxy war in Afghanistan against Soviet Union. So this is an opportunity where Pakistan was able to leverage their influence with United States and tell them, look, man, you gotta rein in Israel here. They're thinking about doing this crazy thing of bombing us. We're happy to work with you on Soviet Union, but you gotta put a leash on Israel. So this is my understanding of how it unfolded. But maybe you can share with us what you found through your own research.
So what happened in 1981 was that the Israelis were successful in bombing Iraq. It was called Operation Babylon. This was a carbon copy of the same thing, except, as you said, it was far away. And in that Operation Babylon, they had this Iraqi fighter pilot with them who was actually talking to the ground men, and they formed a decoy, and then they came in and bombed the entire area and then went out. So uh, in the same plan, they had a Pakistani pilot with them who was caught by the ISI, the Intelligence Services of Pakistan. And then they tracked him down. He was going to India. He went to Tel Aviv as well. And then he caught him and got a lot of things out of him. So they got a wind of what happened, what was about to happen. And as you said, yeah, the Operation Cyclone was also ongoing. And actually, what happened was we also secured, we are in talks of that same Pakistani officer, intelligence officer. Maybe we might get a piece of his interview as well, but he's not feeling well these days. He's very old, he's retired. So he said that in an interview that I saw last night, an old interview, he said that the Americans did come and talk to the Pakistanis to fold up their nuclear program. And it was during this Operation Cyclone, and it was Ziaul Haq, who was a dictator at that time. He told them off. He said that you should, like, we have parameters of our operation. It's better that you stay in your own parameter and not tell us what to do. So this is what the Pakistani side of the story says. Hopefully, we're gonna get an interview done with him. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I would love to listen to that. That's just a fascinating piece of history.
Yeah. So later now, how so Pakistan became the only nation to survive this thing. How do you put this?
Well, I think it's one is because the distance. It's just beyond the capability of reach of conventional Israeli air force, and two, I think it's also because United States do not want to jeopardize its operation against Soviet Union because it needed Pakistan's cooperation in the Afghanistan operation against Soviet Union. That is far more important to United States during the Cold War than whether Pakistan gets a nuclear weapon. Because because at that time it was believed, at least on the U.S. side, what the Soviet push to Afghanistan is because Soviet Union is looking for a warm water port. They were going to have to push through to Pakistan to have to access the warm water port. The port of Gwadar, for example, on the mouth of Persian Gulf, and that would be unacceptable for U.S. For Soviet Red Navy to have a base so near the Middle East. So this is why they put a lot of resources into funding the Mujahideens to launch raid from Pakistan into Afghanistan. So the Pakistani help is absolutely crucial for this effort, and for US they probably just did a look at the balance of things and just decided the new Pakistan nuclear program is something they don't need to worry about at that moment. They're far more concerned about Soviet at that time.
Yeah, and we can also like find videos of Netanyahu, I think 5 to 10 years old videos, actually saying that the two problems for Israel is Iran, and after Iran, it's Pakistan. He's on record.
Yes. Yes. Oh, by the way, and another thing also is, at that time, Israel's plan was to leverage cooperation with India because their aircraft will have to be based in India to launch the strike. And people also have to keep in mind, back in 1980s, United States was far closer to Pakistan than to India. India was in the other camp. India was allied with Soviet Union at the time. And so, United States is not that eager to give India a leverage, a leg up in its competition against Pakistan. So I think that's also another concern.
We
That
arrive
that
to
and,
another,
and this is
yeah,
part. Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
So the other question coming is, how did the nations who have nuclear bombs right now get the nuclear bombs?
Okay, that is a pretty big topic. We all know about Manhattan Project. There's a movie out now, Oppenheimer,
Yeah.
and this is this that's when how the first world's first nuclear program came about in United States, and we know because through Rosenbergs who leak the U.S. Uh, leaked the designs, the atom bomb design to the Soviet. So the Soviet were able to acquire the design for nuclear program and be able to have explode their own nuclear device shortly after. So Soviet Union and United States became the world's first two superpowers with position of nuclear weapon. And then, of course, U.S. did its knowledge sharing with its ally, which is France and UK. Basically, the UK and French program all heavily depended on their knowledge transfer from United States. So that left among the so at that in the 1950s, 1960s, the among the five permanent members of United Security Council, only China does not have a nuclear program, right? So China, even back in 1945, right after Japanese surrender, then the Chinese leader Chiang Kai-shek actually expressed an interest to acquire nuclear program from United States. Back then, U.S. was a backer of Chiang Kai-shek, but that kind of get disrupted by the Chinese Civil War. The Chinese communists won civil war, founded the People's Republic in 1949, and then uh, soon afterwards, Korean War broke out. And during the Korean War, United States, particularly the U.S. Commander General MacArthur, threatened to use nuclear weapon against China. MacArthur famously said, we just need to drop anywhere between 30 to 50 nukes in Manchuria to cut off their supply line to cut off the Chinese supply line into Korea. Of course, that never get carried out because MacArthur got fired. Because President Truman at the time, he did not want to widen the scope of the war to have a full war with China. But fast forward to 1954, 1955, during the first Taiwan Strait crisis, this is when Chiang Kai-shek and his KMT army still occupy these outlying islands off just a little bit offshore from mainland China, and China and under Mao's direction, People's Liberation Army and Navy started operation to take those offshore islands. That sparked the first Taiwan Strait crisis. So basically, the Chinese attention were diverted to Korean War for 3 years after the ceasefire in Korean War in 1953. The attention was back on to focusing on Taiwan. So during the 1954-1955 first Taiwan Strait crisis, U.S. Pentagon came out with a plan to use nukes against China. We now know this because we have the leak back a few years ago by the Daniel Ellsberg. He revealed that just before his death. But I think China also knew this as well because China had a long-term mole inside the CIA who wasn't discovered until 1980s. So Mao must have known about this because Mao had famously made a remark about about prospect of nuclear war. He said, "You know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We have a lot of people in China. We have a lot of land. The U.S. only have a limited stockpile of nuclear weapons. There's no way they can wipe us out." And he was correct because at the time, U.S. did an assessment. at that time, U.S. was already planning for a possible nuclear exchange with Soviet Union, and and they decided if a full nuclear exchange were to take place between Soviet Union and United States, U.S. would also launch nukes against China because they don't want a third power to emerge as a winner as a result of the nuclear war. So, but when they did the calculation, we realized there's a diminished return on using nukes against China, because at that time China was still a very agrarian society. Only like 20% of Chinese population live in the cities. 80% of the Chinese people live in the countryside. So they realized even if they wipe out the Chinese cities, like they will run out of the target. They will run out of target because the people, other Chinese, 80% of Chinese people are spread out living in the countryside. And this is probably why Mao made that speech. You say, it doesn't matter. We have plenty of people. We will survive this. But from 1954, that's when China started approaching Soviet Union, the Soviet leaders, then Khrushchev, about possibly gaining the nuclear weapons from Soviet Union. But at that time, Khrushchev's like, nah, don't worry about it. Soviet Union will extend the nuclear umbrella to China, and you guys don't need nuclear weapons. And so then, then later, China actually discovered several uranium mines. So up to this point, China was actually exporting uranium to Soviet Union. There were uranium mine that was discovered and been mined by Soviet Union in Xinjiang, northwest China, and China has been exporting those uraniums to fuel Soviet nuclear program all throughout early 50s. So then in 1957, this is what 1956. That's when the Hungarian uprising happened, and the Soviet had to send troops into Budapest to crush the Hungarian uprising, and Khrushchev suddenly. And there was also a Soviet plot to overthrow Khrushchev by Malenkov and Molotov. So Khrushchev suddenly find himself, he needed political allies. He needed political support. And to that, he looked to Mao in China. And so China used this opportunity to say, hey, we'll support you. How about give us nuclear weapons? and Khrushchev agreed. And that's when Khrushchev sent Soviet engineers, nuclear scientists to China. They provided the design documents starting from 1957 to June 1959. But around 1959, there's this Sino-Soviet split was starting to happen because of disagreement. It's too big of a topic to get into now, but let's just say that the Sino-Soviet split started to happen. And at that time, Khrushchev was about to sign a arms control treaty with United States on nuclear non-proliferation. So Khrushchev started to backtrack on giving nuclear assistance toward China, and eventually eventually that year, all the Soviet assistance stopped. All the Soviet nuclear scientists was recalled, taking back their plans, left a lot of the project half finished. And this is why China named their first nuclear program Project 596 to mark the date, June 1959, when the Soviet withdrew their support. And so now the Chinese were on their own. But besides the Soviet support, both in material and knowledge transfer, Chinese, they also had other sources. Like China, during the World War II period, is a lot of the Chinese scientists, students, they went to United States to study, and they study nuclear physics. They study, in fact, one of these, the most famous one is Chen Qisen, who went to my alma mater Caltech to be a
Ah.
professor, and that's where Chen Qisen founded the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Mm.
He was a co-founder of the JPL, and he was part of the Manhattan Project, but he was focusing on ballistic missiles, developing missile program, and he actually, when the war ended in 1945, he actually um, went to Germany to interrogate the Nazi scientist von Braun, who would later became the father of uh, American space program. So, but when People's Republic of China was founded in 1949, Chen Xuesen wanted to return to China to participate in the construction of New China, but the United States wouldn't let him. They detained him, uh, prevented him from leaving. There was a He was basically under detention for a few years until after the Korean War. There was a prisoner swap deal. So in return for 9 or 5 American, I think 10 American pilots who were captured, Chen Xuesen was exchanged for those American pilots. And he went to China, became the father of Chinese space program and Chinese ballistic missile program. On the other side, Chen Xuesen had a
And
couple colleagues.
this was
Go
year
ahead.
1955.
I think he returned to China around 1955.
Okay.
and and he another reason US detained him for so long is they want to make sure his knowledge is out of date by the time they let him go back to China. But it doesn't matter. By 1955, later 1957, China would have gained the knowledge transfer from Soviet Union, and they will actually send a new batch of students to the Soviet Union to learn, and so this is the ballistic side missile part of the equation. But for the actual nukes, there's actually a couple of Chinese physicists who were friends of Chen Xuesen who were also studying in United States. Wang Jiaxian and another guy's name I don't remember. Um, they also returned to China in the early 50s to participate in Chinese nuclear program. Now, the Chinese nuclear program was top secret at the time. At the time the hus they when they got to send to like very remote part of China, like in the desert, to do experiment. And like a lot of the times the husband would not tell their wives where they're going. There are cases when both husband and wife, they were all part of the nuclear program, but working on the different pieces, but they would not tell each other, so they didn't even know. And so this was kind of the top priority given to the secrecy surrounding the program. And with the Soviet with the Soviet provided design and material, even though the Soviet Union withdrew their support after 1959, Chinese were finally able to ramp up their testing. So by 1964, China exploded their first nuclear bomb, and they had to develop the hydrogen bomb all on their own because they don't have the Soviet help for that. But in 1967, they exploded the first hydrogen bomb in China. China actually exploded a hydrogen bomb 1 year before France. Um, and so then all five permanent members of UN by this point, by 1958, by 1954, had nuclear weapons. And this is where later we're fast forwarding a couple of decades. This is when they wanted to restricts the nuclear club, so to speak. That's where we have the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, right? Because the members of a nuclear club don't want anybody else to join the nuclear club. They don't want new nations to acquire nukes, but every other countries keep on trying. So at that, what we do know is Brazil had a nuclear program going. Libya had a nuclear program going. Iraq had a nuclear program going. South Africa had a nuclear program going. Taiwan had a nuclear program going. And in fact, Taiwan's nuclear program was so far ahead. They were like very close to make a bomb, but they had a mole. There was a defector from the Taiwan nuclear program that went to United States, that went to tell U.S. what Taiwan was doing, and U.S. put its foot down and forced Taiwan to dismantle its nuclear program because like why do you need nukes? We got you covered. You need us to protect you. You don't need nukes. Get rid of your nukes. So Taiwan got rid of its nukes in 1980s. Um, right around the time when the Pakistan was building its own nuclear program, and we also know both Saddam and Gaddafi gave up their nuclear program under Western pressures in efforts to improve their tie with the West. And then we have and South Africa, because they were isolated internationally because of their apartheid. Um, they tried to pursue their own nuclear program, but that program was abandoned both as pressure from United States and also end of apartheid brought an end to that. And Brazil, similar story. And the so that left to North Korea. North Korea they started their nuclear program rather late, but they are they actually, I believe, if what U.S. intelligence report were to be believed, North Korea actually were able to gain some knowledge transfer from Pakistan in exchange for missile technology, for North Korean missile technology. So that's where North Korea got some of the designs on nuclear weapons, and then they just it's just a matter of acquiring nuclear material. Like the hardest part, actually, making nuclear weapon nowadays is actually the material, the nuclear material. Um, uh, to have enough enriched uranium and plutonium, and this is why the piece the deal Iran originally signed with Obama administration was for Iran to give up its uranium and plutonium. So like all the uranians, they will let France handle it for them to process into fuel rod for their nuclear reactor, and then the plutonium that was produced, they were to give it to Russia to be disposed of. So then Iran will have no nuclear material to work with for a bomb program. But Trump tore up that deal in his first term. This allowed Iran to enrich their uranium to 60%, right? And it from my understanding, it's a lot harder to refine uranium from 0% to 60 than is to refine from 60 to weapon grade. And that's important because you need more centrifuge to do the initial enrichment to get to the 60%. And whereas if you want to take it from 60% to the weapon grade, you need less centrifuge. Like those centrifuge are very fragile. Those are what Israel seek to destroy in their bombing campaign against Iranian nuclear facility. But because now Iran require less number of centrifuge to attain weapon grade uranium, Iran is a big country, like they can hide their centrifuge anywhere. You can, like so now Iran is actually closer to the nuclear threshold more than ever. If they decide to pursue that option.
Talking about that exclusive country clubs that have the nuclear weapons, they say that other countries shouldn't have it. Does that sound fair?
Well, that's how they maintain their monopoly, right? I mean, this is it's we live, Ali. We live by in the law of the jungle. Unfortunately, that's how the strong power try to preserve their own position, and this is why in 1998, when India first exploded their nuclear device, followed by Pakistan's nuclear test, initially sanction was placed on both countries.
Yeah.
U.S. placed sanction on both India and Pakistan, but for India, the sanction only lasted a couple of years. Then U.S. lifted the sanction because India said, remember India's defense minister Fernandez very public stated, it's like, okay, our nuclear weapon is all it's just for the purpose of aiming at China. Like that's the only reason we're developing nuclear weapon. So for that, this is how India was finally inducted into Quad, into because United States saw, oh, okay, we can make this turn this to our advantage. You can use India as our a force to contain China with. We can counterbalance China with India. This is how India got invited to all these meetings, and how India became a member of Quad. With the Pakistan, the U.S. sanction lasted longer. This is why United States held off on the delivery of F-16s, which Pakistan already paid for, and various sanctions that pretty much until those sanctions only partially lifted until 2001 after U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. At that time, U.S. realized, okay, we're going to need Pakistan's help again, cooperation again. So in return, they start lifting some of those sanctions. So that's the history of that.